But before I do, I want to just talk about two key concepts. So the bridge here between the just in case and the on the job is on the job learning technology is the thing we call experiential learning. So experiential learning is that type of learning that allows you to draw from experience. You're building on the experiences on the job. And if you kind of go up, so the experiential learning, I think maybe the story idea was experiential learning. That's the bridge. And if you kind of go up this crazy little ladder here to this nirvana area, you would have just in case and on the job, and you merge those together and you get in the job. Okay? So what we're trying to do is build experiential programs that appear in the job. And keep those concepts in mind as we switch over to Dawn. How about that for a segue? Just that little right-hand flicker, and you're off to, oh yeah, you need this thing too, huh?
Very painful for the audience.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about a little bit is how do you know what to push to somebody? How do they know what they need to pull to themselves? And we were talking about the different learning models earlier and structured versus unstructured. And learning really started off as was mentioned, it was very unstructured, but it tended to be driven by people's experience. It tended to be driven by, the caveman touching the fire and going, aha, don't touch fire. Well, that's a form of assessment, self-assessing. If I touch fire, I get burned. So how do you manage the knowledge necessary to drive learning? I found this quote as I was looking at it. Companies waste billions of dollars or billions on knowledge management. And I think that's worth repeating. Companies waste billions of dollars or billions on knowledge management. But what's more important is the completion of that statement, because they fail to figure out what knowledge they need. Now, interestingly enough, the Knowledge Management Institute specifically recognizes that. This is from the Knowledge Management Institute's mission statement. The thing I want to emphasize here is focusing on learners' needs. How do you know what that learner's needs is? Clearly, the Knowledge Management Institute has picked up on that very early on. Knowledge management is only effective if it meets that learner's needs. And you also talk about, personal knowledge management, and that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about learning process and assessment. As I mentioned earlier, learning really sort of started off as figure out what you need to know, learn it, figure out what you need to know, and learn it. One of the big drivers to changing that is our modern K through 12 education system. Something we were bringing up earlier. It became very, very structured because knowledge delivery became a factory process. It got away from a true learning experience where you were trying to figure out, okay, what do these people need to know? Now, some guru somewhere decided that everybody needs to know the same thing. We'll produce a little factory, run people through it. Very effectively used by the Army in their entire training process. Everybody's going to learn how to do the exact same thing at the exact same time in the exact same way. And in some cases, that's worthwhile. But it really relegated the concept of assessment to sort of an afterthought. You learn, and then you take an assessment so you can get a piece of paper that says, yes, they went through a learning program. But what did they learn? What was the true value? So our standard system became learn, test, and then you're done, which resulted in this type of situation. Now, with your pet, it's funny. With your employees, it's very expensive. And a lot of employees make that same decision. typically in modern American industry today, how do you decide where you're going to spend your very, very meager training budget within your organization? Now, we're all going to answer that question properly, but in reality, 9 times out of 10, training budget is used as a reward. So who do you send to training? Your best employees. Do they come back a better employee? Probably not, but hopefully at least they come back. So instead of focusing on figuring out what our employees need to know, what they need to learn to be more productive, we've tended to push learning and knowledge at them. Now, knowledge should be managed within the context of where value is created. Once again, I actually pulled this off the knowledge management website. You've all heard the old saying, give a man a fish and you fed him for a day, teach him to fish and you fed him for his entire life. However, if that person happens to be a Bedouin in the Sahara Desert, you probably haven't done a lot for them. There's not a lot they can do with that knowledge you've provided. By the other token, if they happen to be the captain of a fishing trawler out of Gloucester, Massachusetts, your time with the rod and reel probably didn't help him a lot on his job either. So once again, you're not focusing on what they need to know. Now, in both a push and a pull situation, whether it's structured or unstructured, you have 2 issues you have to deal with: awareness and learning. The guy down here in this box, he doesn't know what he needs to pull. And you may not even have a good idea of what to push at him. This guy may be a great worker, he just doesn't know what he doesn't know and doesn't know what he needs to know for his job. The unconscious competence, once again, this is a good worker. They know just about everything they need to know to do their job, but they don't really realize it. And they don't have any idea what to pull, and you're going to be pushing stuff at them that they don't need to use, they don't need to have. The conscious incompetent is the great target for the pull system. This person is aware that there's knowledge they need to go find to be better at their job, and if they're a motivated employee, they're going to go out and find it. And then you've got the nirvana employee. They're consciously competent. They know what they know, and more importantly, they know what they don't know. So they're going to be very capable at their job. Of course, we don't live in a static world, and generally speaking, you don't want employees to be static. So you're constantly in this situation where the conscious competent worker becomes the unconscious incompetent at the next level, because as they progress, as they move from being a company commander to a battalion S3, they really know how to lead troops, but they don't know a lot about being a staff officer. And they need now to go through this cycle and start progressing. And this is where assessment comes in. This is where you're dealing with what we call the virtuous cycle, where you determine what people need to know to do their job. We've all been involved in task analysis, job analysis, whatever you want to call it. That tells a person what I must know to do my job. Assessment tells them what they need to know. What of those? Yes?
Can we go back to K-12 education again?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And let's get a politically sensitive topic, which is the testing that's going on in schools, No Child Left Behind and things like that. So they've ramped up a lot on assessment. Right? Mm-hmm. But unlike, I'm just providing a counterpoint here, I want to see what your reaction is, but you would hope that that would improve the education. Now we have a lot more information, we can tailor, as you say, tailor the learning, but that's not what happens. What's happening in schools a lot is that they're spending more time on, like, essentially how to quote-unquote...
training to test.
How to beat the test,
yep.
Exactly.
Training to test.
So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. It seems to be meeting with your model here, doing more assessment, but yet not getting to the goal that you're describing.
How you assess is can be as important or even more important